Dr. Gersbloem, thank you for accepting our invitation to Curaçao Chronicle. First of all, what is your profession?
It's a good question. I'm a public health physician and I'm an epidemiologist. An epidemiologist, unlike most people tend to think, is not only about studying epidemics. An epidemiologist, the word comes from epi, that means about or over, and demios is Greek for people. It's about the study of the frequency of diseases in communities, to find out why certain diseases arise in a community, why certain groups are affected and not other groups, what are the risk factors, why do explain the spread of disease, can you figure out what are the determining factors that influence the outcome of disease and the morbidity and mortality about the disease, etc. So it's more about studying the frequencies and the whys and the hows and the wheres of diseases in general, and not only infectious diseases. I hope I made it clear and not unclear.
Yes,
Yes.
that's good. Right now, we know about coronavirus and how it's spreading globally. And that's the reason why we requested an interview with you, because we wanted to know, do we have here in Curaçao reasons to be worried about this?
It depends on how you want to answer the question. As you may or may not know, Curaçao forms part of the world.
Yes.
And as such, we have the same reason to be worried or not worried as anybody else in the world. Not more, not less. The case is this. There's a lot of hype going on out there. You know this. Makes our task more difficult because you try to give people good information on basis of what they can decide what to do for themselves. But your competition is enormous. Social media has taken over. The rapidness of conferring information to others has increased incredibly since just merely a couple of years ago. And there's a lot of news being spread that may or may not be truth. And so it's very difficult to try to keep the information solid, true, and that people don't go into a panic. Why is that important for us? Because we know when we act on basis of panic or fear that we don't always make the right choices, that we might actually make things worse. So it's important to act on basis of knowledge, of facts, and of reason. And this is what we're trying to do. So how does that translate in answering your question? We are following the facts as closely as possible. And we are acting upon those to do what is necessary to, first of all, try to avoid as long as possible to introduce the virus into our island. Second, if once it does get in, to try to limit as much as possible the eventual spread of disease. And if it does get there, to know what to do about it and what are the actions to be taken. And these are the things that we're constantly talking to the professionals and to all other public health officials and other important partners in the field, because it's not only us, to try to achieve all of these goals. Now, what is it I'm talking about? When you have a coronavirus, for example, when you detect a new virus that is spread through coughing, through sneezing, so in droplets forms, that spreads through, that people can, if they're breathing, which I assume we all are, if not we have another problem. So by breathing in these droplets, you can infect others. You can also possibly affect them because if the droplets stay for a while on surfaces, the virus may survive for some time on the surfaces. And as a rule, viruses need the human body to stay alive. But some viruses may stay alive a lot longer on the surfaces. The good news is they are very easily defeated by using good disinfectants of surfaces, of the common disinfectants that we use in our household or that they use in the hospitals. So that's the good news. So you need to maintain that idea that if it's on surfaces and you touch them, you need to disinfect surfaces. You need to wash your hands regularly with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. These are important hygiene measures that you have to take regardless over what kind of virus we're talking about. Because viruses and disease can very easily spread through hands. When you bring your hands to your face, so your eyes, your nose, your mouth, that's the way you introduce them into your body and get infected. So these measures are constant measures that we do with the common cold, with the common flu, with corona, with all of them. There are important messages to heed about your hand hygiene. Also, if you want to help in spreading diseases that can easily be spread by droplets, is to heed how you cough. Cover your cough. Cough inside your elbow, the bend of your elbow. I don't know how to say that correctly,
Right.
but try to cough within that. Keep the limiting of spread of droplets to a minimum, or use a paper tissue that after using it you discard into a waste bin, and then clean your hands again with water and soap, so as not to give somebody else your hand and so spread anyway if once he or she does this to his face or her face. So these are actually the most important measures that any individual can take to helping us not spread disease and helping yourself not become contaminated. Getting back to the virus. So we've been put on alert, all of us. As you know, end of December, beginning of January, China reported a new virus. How does a new virus get detected anyway?
Yeah.
So this is how you have to view it. If people have a mild form of disease, they may or may not go to the doctor. They may recognize it as, well, it's a kind of flu, why bother go to a doctor? I know what he's going to tell me. Yeah, you've got the flu, stay home, use paracetamol or Tylenol, whatever you want to call it. Drink a lot of liquids, take something for the cough, rest. Because we don't have any really good medication against viruses. If it's a bacteria, we can give you antibiotics. We have to watch out that the bacterial infection doesn't superimpose the viral infection. So because you're weakening your body and your body is using its defense forces to get rid of the virus, it might be prone to getting other bacterial infections which usually it would take care of, but now is limited in its response. So if you get a bacterial infection on top of the viral infection, that's when you need to go. So if it gets worse, lasts longer, fever keeps on staying on, that's when you need to go to the doctor to make sure that it's not something else. All right, so far so good. So we think it's a flu. You might go to the doctor, you'll get the same messages. You might not go to the doctor because you heed them by yourself. But there is a group of people that runs a higher risk of having severe disease. Now, who are these people? The elderly, people who are known to have chronic disease, myocardial problems, cardiac problems, pulmonary problems, diabetes, cancer, different diseases that affect your immune system, or that they're on medications that affect your immune system. These people run risk of having severe disease. Why? Because their defenses are low, are already hampered by other disease. And when their defenses are low, then the virus can create more problems in their respiratory tract, and they are more prone to getting the secondary bacterial infection, as I just discussed, because their defenses are low to begin with. So, and if that doesn't get recognized in time, then they can get into a severe disease mode. They would need to be admitted to hospital, and they run a risk of even fatal outcome. This holds true for the flu, we all know. Every year, there's a certain amount of people that fall into this category primarily that dies because of flu. The flu caused by influenza most of the time. There is a difference between influenza and corona in that we have vaccines against influenza. That's why every year we offer these vaccines to exactly that group that is running highest risk of getting severe disease, to try to protect especially that group from getting severe disease and getting into hospital admittance indication or getting into a fatality mode. But we can't do that for corona because we don't have any vaccine as yet. And it'll take about at least a year and a half before we do have an effective vaccine. So these are the reasons why you have to take measures to avoid as much as possible corona to coming in. Because the coronavirus is handling itself, is behaving not unequal to what we see in the flus that we already know. Why am I saying that? Because in the beginning everybody said alert, alarm, severe disease, people are dying. Yes, because when people don't go to the doctor, as I just told you, you don't test them. When you start testing, when groups of people start coming into the hospital and they belong to that risk group, and you see groups coming in with severe disease, you said, hey, there's a whole bunch of people coming in now. What is it? What's going on? There's something new. That's when you start testing. When you don't find the usual culprits, you keep on looking to see what else could it be. Then you find a new coronavirus and you report it. But what you're seeing is severe disease coupled with many deaths. So this is what you're seeing. You're thinking at that point in time, everybody who gets this is very sick and has a very high chance of passing away, because you're only seeing the severe cases. You're not taking into account that many more people probably already had the disease and it spread already, but that was a mild form. It's just a group of people who do have a very severe form. So once you start developing the test and you start testing more people, you will find more cases, and then you will see a divergence between the amount of people that tested positive and the death. And the death toll starts going down. And there becomes a bigger diversion and a discrepancy between the total amount of people who have been detected with the virus and people who actually died from the virus. And we look at that death rate, that fatality rate, that is not unlike fatality rate we see with influenza. All right? In actuality, it's probably even lower. Because remember what I just said. If that's the way the disease started to spread in China, that means there are a whole bunch of more people that you don't know about, that have never been detected. So if you will relate the fatality case to the people who are, including those undetected, then the death rate in actuality is a lot lower even than what we think. Do you understand?
Yes.
So therefore we say, hey guys, calm down. Yes, there is a new virus. Yes, there is a reason to be concerned because we don't have any vaccine to protect exactly that group of people that runs a risk of having more severe disease. This is the reason while I'm saying, calm down, there's probably many more people that have the disease, and it is in most cases mild. Still we have to take measures, and that's not contradictory. The reason that for doing that, even though we don't think it's that big a disaster, but it will be, is because we need to protect that specific group because we don't have any other way of protecting them.
Okay.
So how do we do that? Because this was your question. Are we ready for it? First, you need the capabilities. How do we know it's not on the island already? How do we know this? Because we have what we call a syndromic surveillance system, which means this. We have a representative group of general practitioners on the island that are divided evenly over the island, that are working with us for at least 12 or 13 years already, that on a weekly basis are reporting different syndromes that are connected with different types of infectious disease. And why are we doing this? So that we know what the patterns are of different infectious diseases on our island. So we can easily detect if more is going on than what we can expect on average for that point in time in our island, that we know if it's out of the usual or not. So if there's something else going on, we can actually detect that. And when we see that, we ask our physicians, please do testing. And on basis of those testings, we know that we have influenza on the island for a couple of weeks already, as most of you probably know. You know somebody who's had fever with severe throat ache, with having general malaise, and they had a flu. And we also know which influenza is circulating, and they're the same strains that are circulating in the Netherlands as in the United States. That's why we're offering the vaccine on a yearly basis of people who run extra risk. All right?
These doctors, they report to you.
These doctors all send in on a weekly basis. They send their data in to us. And this is how we collect them, and this is how we know and can detect on a weekly basis what's going on.
Okay.
So So we have a system of detecting whether it's on the island or not. We are in contact with the GPs of the island, and also with the pulmonologists, with the ear, nose, and throat doctors, with the pediatricians, with the public health people, and so on and so on. So we're in extensive contact with all of these groups of people, informing them about the policy, what to do, what are the measures that we are taking. So the professionals are aware. Within the hospital, they also have their own protocols. They have isolation rooms if necessary, but the policy is actually geared to, if we do get a case on the island, to keep them as much as possible isolated at home. We don't want them to go to the doctor or to the hospital, certainly if they don't have any severe disease. Why not? Because we want to limit the opportunity of spreading the disease as much as possible.
Yeah.
So this is the idea. The general idea is, if you do have symptoms, and what are these symptoms? Fever, with cough, and with problems breathing, and you've traveled to an area where there is sustained transmission. It was only China hitherto, but that's expanded to certain regions in Italy, like the Veneto region, the Lombardy region, South Korea, Singapore, Iran. These are all areas with sustained transmission, and you see it now happening in the world, as we've been saying from all along in Curaçao. It's a question of time for it to spread, because if you follow my story, more people will have had the disease. You have had them before they closed down, made a close down on China. It will have spread, and that's why you're seeing cases popping up all over the place. Because it's very difficult to contain a viral disease that spreads through coughing or sneezing, that looks like a flu. It's very difficult to contain that. And because the world has become a smaller place, travel has become very easy. You can go all over the world within 24 or 48 hours, and you can very easily spread the disease from one end of the world to the next. That's extremely easy. So therefore, it's going to be very difficult to contain. So what can you do? You have your system to detect. You need to have your laboratory systems in place as well. We're working on that. We have the probes, we have the primers, we have the stuff that we need to do. We're in a testing phase. I hope by this week, or at the latest by next week, that we'll have the laboratory testing capabilities on the island itself. And if not, we can always send it to the Netherlands, and within 2 or 3 days we get the result also. So that's always been quick enough. Second, our physicians are notified, they know what to do, they know what the policy is. Third, not in the least, at your points of entry, so your harbor and your airport, policies are known as well. We're able to, their systems to allow the airlines to inform us beforehand if they have a severely ill person on board, to notify the tower so that we're there to expect them when they arrive, to be able to isolate the person in question, to see whether there is a link. So do they come from a place that has sustained transmission, and do they have the symptoms that belong to this, that we can do what we need to do to keep the person away from influencing or infecting other people, take the necessary testing, and guiding the person to wherever, or helping him transfer to wherever he needs to be it his hotel room or at home. If they don't have any severe cases, that's where we prefer him or her to be, and keep on monitoring that person isolated until we have a result of the test. So that's the general policy. Why don't they go to the hospital? Because in the hospital you have lots of ill people who by nature are vulnerable. So you don't want to expose them to a new virus of which they do form a risk group of becoming severely ill. So in mild cases, you try to keep them out of the hospital as much as possible, so you prefer isolating them in their own homes or in their hotel rooms, giving them instruction and closely monitoring those that you are keeping isolated in their rooms. If you should become severely ill, of course you will be needed to transport to the hospital. We'll do that by ambulance. There are protocols to disinfect the ambulance afterwards, to ensure that other people don't get contaminated when use of ambulance after that. And the hospital will be notified ahead of time so that they can prepare isolation rooms. Those are special rooms that are pressurized to avoid as much as possible that people will be a source of infection for others. So all of these measures are in place, have been shared and communicated with all of the actors involved. And these are the measures that are taken to try to do exactly what I told you at the outset of the interview. How do we try to keep the virus out of the island as much as possible? If it does happen to come, how do we contain it? And when there is a case, how do we deal with it? So,
Seems like Curaçao is ready then.
as ready as can be. Of course, if and we said from the beginning, it's difficult to contain a respiratory virus away from anybody. It's more a matter of time when it's going to show up and not whether. Probably if it keeps spreading, you see that now in Europe rapidly more countries are reporting cases. And also you can imagine that China, who has taken very drastic measures in trying to contain it within their own country, the question is how long can they keep that up?
Yeah.
And they probably cannot keep that up forever. So you can expect within a couple of weeks that they will open up the borders again. And once that happens, the spread, of course, will go exponentially quicker. So yes, so we can expect that there will come a point in time that we will have to detect and do other stuff. And we're trying to keep up with the rapidly changing image in the world, because rapidly there are more areas that are being added on that have transmission, and we'll need to do that in order to keep our population as safe as possible.
Thank you, Doctor.
You're very welcome.